A kingdom called Tenball lived in peace for a long time, without any wars. However, one day, monsters suddenly appeared and began to infest the kingdom. Because of that, the kingdom ordered its best spirit mage to face the threat. With so many enemies, the challenge proved extremely difficult, and near death, the young fighter made one last request to the spirit fighting by his side. No matter what happens, please release all of my powers. Hearing this, the spirit granted the man's wish, defeating all the monsters at once. However, after using all his strength in that attack, the mage completely collapsed, left on the verge of death. Refusing to let that happen, the spirit carried the human into the spirit world. After that harsh battle, peace was restored once again in Tenball, and the young warrior became known as the hero who saved the kingdom from the monster storm. As for the hero, even after 10 years had passed, he never returned, and to this day, everyone living in the kingdom prays that the savior is doing well. Hearing a mother tell this story to her son in the plaza, a little girl comments to her father that the hero really should have returned by now. The man scolds the little Ellen and orders 2 skewers from a vendor. Ellen insists and asks how long her father is going to keep avoiding going home, but the man ignores her. At that moment, 2 men approach to buy 2 skewers and end up realizing that the hooded man is none other than Lord Roval. When they say the Lord's name, everyone around looks shocked and repeats it at the same time. Startled, with no way to explain himself, Roval runs off with his daughter in his arms, hoping to escape for good. However, he ends up running into a dead end, with wide grins on their faces. The pursuers seem pleased to have found the Lord, but Roval doesn't want to talk and uses a teleportation spell to get out of there, reappearing under a bridge, far from the commotion. Once again, his daughter scolds him, asking why he doesn't just show himself already. With no patience left, Roval answers that he doesn't want any trouble in his life, especially because no one ever asked him before calling him a hero all over the place. Fed up with the man's behavior, Ellen tells us that her father is actually the hero who saved the kingdom Roval Vancraft. According to the girl, there's a lot more to his story than people know. After almost dying from using all his strength in the final attack, it was said that Roval would take several years to recover. But fortunately, thanks to the gods, it so happened that Origin Ellen's mother was the Queen of Spirits, and she was able to restore the human in just 1 year. As time went by, the two fell in love and formed a pact, which caused Roval to become half-spirit. As a result, Roval lost the ability to control his powers, so he had to train in the spirit world before returning to the human world to adapt. Ellen was born as their daughter 8 years ago. But the truth is, the girl is a reincarnated soul. Before reincarnating, she was a scientist in Japan, spending her days researching new materials and developing resources through synthesis. But for some unknown reason, she simply died. Then, whether by karma or not, Ellen was reborn in this world with the memories of her past life. Maybe because she couldn't handle it at first. When she was only 2 years old, she couldn't control her powers and caused a lot of trouble. That's why she and her father are training together. Speaking of the man, Roval comments that he managed to get rid of the pursuers for now. And that opens the way for Ellen to say again that it's his own fault this keeps happening since he keeps hiding from people like a madman. By the way, another man ends up finding the fugitive, clearly knowing exactly who Lord Roval is. Recognizing the man as well, Roval tries to run away again, but Ellen convinces him to stop. She asks if he knows the man, and he explains that it's Alberto, his former bodyguard. Suddenly, the Lord completely changes his attitude and asks the man if his daughter isn't adorable, with her silver hair and eyes that shine like diamonds. With the mood calmer, the two sit down to talk properly. Right away, Alberto tells him that Duke Vancraft has been waiting for Roval's return, as well as everyone else. After everything that happened during the monster storm 10 years ago, the Vancraft family rose in status, and now Roval's younger brother, Lord Soval, has become the head of the family. However, there's a big problem. Soval had to marry Miss Agile due to pressure from the king. Upon hearing that that hag is in his house, Roval refuses even more to return. But knowing her father has a soft heart, Ellen uses emotional blackmail to convince him to go back, accusing him of not caring about his family. Roval simply can't handle his daughter being disappointed in him, so the man bursts into tears and promises he'll return just to please the little pest. Inside the carriage, on their way to their destination, Ellen asks who this Agile person is, and Alberto explains that she's the second princess of the kingdom of Tenball. Roval adds that she was once his fiancée. According to her, she was destined to marry into the Vancraft family, and Roval should be grateful for that. However, he cancelled the engagement when he learned he would be going to battle against the monsters, since he was certain he would die. Alberto adds that this whole engagement idea was Agile's, and now Soval is the one suffering because of it. Soon after becoming Duke, the woman already set her eyes on him. Changing the subject, Alberto wants to know how on earth the Lord spent those 10 years in the spirit world. But Roval ignores the question and asks if the former bodyguard wants him to go after that woman. Without a moment's hesitation, Alberto confirms that he does. These days, the Van Craeft family has been struggling with serious financial problems, all thanks to Agiel's extravagance. Roval feels it's his fault that his brother has become the next victim of that snake. So he orders the coachman to change direction before continuing their journey. There's something he needs to take care of first. When they reach a church, the group parks the carriage, and Roval walks in with his daughter. The priest, distracted while sweeping the floor, takes a moment to realize that the great Lord Roval himself has stepped into his humble church. Without wasting any time, Roval asks to have his marriage officially registered in this world, since he had been married in the spirit realm and now needs a 10-ball kingdom document to prove his union. As the priest starts arranging everything for the ceremony, Ellen asks why her father suddenly decided to get married out of nowhere. He replies that, with that viper in the mansion, he needs to take every possible precaution. Soon, everything is ready. The priest opens the holy book of the twin goddesses Ver, the all-seeing, and Var, the coordinator. They will be the witnesses to the union of these two souls. Speaking of which, the priest asks who the lucky bride is. Roval then summons his wife, Ori, who grows emotional at the thought of marrying the man she loves for the second time in her life. Alberto is left speechless when he sees a spirit descending from who knows where, so Roval explains that he himself is half spirit, so really, it's nothing out of the ordinary. Ori, in turn, comments to Alberto that it's been ages since they last saw each other, and that reminds him of the day Roval defeated the storm monsters. The woman who took him away back then was her. Anyway, the ceremony begins. The priest asks if the lovebirds will cherish each other in sickness and in health. Once the marriage is sealed in the human world, the couple share a kiss, reaffirming their bond for the second time. To celebrate the moment, Ellen asks them to raise their left hands. When they do, the little girl uses platinum to form a ring for each of them. She explains that the ring on the left hand symbolizes creation and its connection to the heart, along with a love strong enough to protect one's beloved from the very depths of one's soul. Then, by manipulating carbon, she creates a diamond to set in Ori's ring, representing eternal bond, certainty, purity, and innocence. Finally, she jokes that she could throw rice like people do at weddings, but since there's none around, she decides to release a shower of diamond blessings across the chapel instead, making the moment even more enchanting. As she does, the statues of the twin goddesses, Ver and Var, begin to glow, signaling that they too bless this union. When Ellen was reborn as a spirit, she gained the power to alter the chemical composition and structure of materials. In other words, yeah, she's ridiculously overpowered. As they leave the church, the girl offers the priest a handful of diamonds, leaving him utterly speechless at such generosity. Out on the street, she teases her father, saying he looked really handsome at the wedding. The compliment puts a proud smile on his face, but just as quickly, she takes it back, saying she's disappointed in him now, and refuses to explain why. After cooling his head, Roval decides it's time to go home, but before that, he asks Ori and Ellen to return to the spirit world. He's afraid of what Agiel might do to them if they stay. Still, they can watch everything that happens through the water mirror. Ori admits that if she saw that woman in person, she might rain down towers of fire upon her, while Ellen comments that going back home feels like walking into enemy territory. Roval agrees Agiel is his enemy. Deep in thought, he worries that if the royal family ever finds out about Ellen and tries to force an arranged marriage on her, he'll fight back and things will get ugly. In the end, Ori wishes her husband luck on the front lines, and he returns the gesture with a kiss on her forehead. With everything settled, Roval climbs into the carriage to leave, only to hop back out right away, throwing a childish tantrum like a kid who doesn't want to take a bath. But the girls scold him, insisting he get back in immediately and assuring him he's going to do great. With nowhere to run, the mighty lord tucks his tail between his legs and climbs back into the vehicle. Once he finally departs, Ori and Ellen breathe a sigh of relief and teleport to the Great Hall where the water mirror stands, from where they can follow Roval's journey. Inside the carriage, lost in thought, Alberto doesn't blame Roval for being reluctant. Agiel's obsession with him had always been intense. Back in the day, she forced her way into becoming his fiancée, constantly arrogant and eager to live off others. Under the influence of such a toxic woman, Roval gradually grew distant. Then, when he was 17, the monster storm struck. Using that as an excuse, he broke off the engagement, saying he didn't know if he'd return alive. Furious, Agiel abused her royal connections to send both Roval and his father to the front lines purely out of revenge. What happened after that, everyone already knows. Roval was taken to the spirit world, and his father died in battle. Reflecting on how much time has passed since then, Alberto realizes just how much Roval has changed. The way he looks when he's with Ellen, no one has ever seen that expression before. In the end, maybe he found in the spirit world the happiness he lost in the world of men 10 years ago. If that's the case, after this long reflection, Alberto quietly apologizes to his lord. Roval responds that he understands how powerful Agile's influence is, and how she probably cornered everyone. Still, he blames himself for leaving his family and friends alone all this time, so Alberto, he says, has nothing to apologize for. Later, at every corner, people could see a flag raised, its crest symbolizing the long-awaited return of the hero. As they learned of this news, the townsfolk were ecstatic. On Lord Roval's carriage, there was also one of these flags, and people celebrated as he passed through the surroundings of the kingdom. Upon arriving in Tenball, Roval was welcomed with enthusiasm by the population, who followed the Lord's passage with an air of hope and gratitude. After all, this man was the one responsible for saving the lives of everyone there. As he stepped down from the carriage, he apologized for having been away for these 10 years, but said he was happy to see that people looked well and healthy, and that being welcomed like this was the greatest happiness he could have. After his speech, the hero entered the yard of his mansion, where he was greeted by the butler, who, with tears in his eyes, bowed to his master, with the maid standing beside him. As soon as Roval came in, he immediately heard the heavy footsteps of a certain woman who, upon hearing that it was him arriving, ran down the stairs to speak with him. However, embarrassingly, the woman tripped on her dress and fell badly. Roval asked who she was, and the butler explained that she was none other than Lord Soval's wife, Miss Agile. Agile stood up and tried to throw herself at Roval again, but the man dodged her, which made the clumsy lady fall once more. Without mincing words, the woman revealed that she had been forced to marry Roval's brother because of her father. But fortunately, Roval had never forgotten her and had now returned to the woman he truly loved. In the spirit world, Origin began to emit fire from her hands and had to be calmed down by her daughter before she set the castle ablaze. In the end, the two looked into the water mirror and began to imagine what else that woman might do to poor Roval. As if her mother's ugliness weren't enough, Agile makes a point of introducing her daughter, Emile. To make things worse, the woman claims that Roval is the girl's real father, which makes her run down the stairs in excitement, and, just like her mother, roll down them in an embarrassing way. Either way, Emile is convinced that Roval is her father, which obviously makes the man even more irritated. Not only him, Ellen releases her power upon seeing that hideous girl calling Roval father. Jealous, the girl almost destroys the castle with her uncontrollable power. Origin calms her daughter down and admits that it's frustrating not being able to be there, but unfortunately, the two of them can't interfere for now. Meanwhile, Agile keeps promoting her daughter, saying she's as beautiful as her mother. Out of patience, Roval asks the butler if that girl isn't Soval's daughter, but the servant doesn't know. Speak of the devil, a man finally shows up at the Van Craeft mansion after hearing that his brother has returned. Moved, the man holds Roval's hand as he recognizes him as his brother. Roval comments that Soval looks exactly like their father, and that he's even taller now. Taking advantage of her husband's arrival, Agile again asks him to divorce her soon. Furious, Soval calls his wife an old hag and notices that she bought more luxury rings with the family's money, which is absurd. Agile, on the other hand, believes she's doing the family a favor since she's from the royal family and can't go out looking plain. Roval asks his brother not to expose the family's shame in front of everyone, and the woman uses that to pretend that even his brother understands things better than Soval. The half-spirit then asks to have a word with his brother about everything that's happening. He says he's going to the palace tomorrow and asks Roran, the butler, to notify the Office of Justice. Soval asks what that's about, so Roval explains that he's going to start his brother's divorce process. Agile thinks the man is doing that to marry her, so she becomes overjoyed, though she's terribly mistaken. Through the water mirror, Ellen comments that the situation is much worse than she imagined. When he meets with his brother, Soval apologizes for everything that's been happening. After all, if that woman does whatever she wants, it's mostly because he hasn't been firm enough. Roval already knows more or less what's going on through Alberto, and says that this will all end tomorrow, since they'll definitely kick those two out. Soval asks if Agile's daughter will also be involved, and Roval asks if by any chance she's his daughter too. Being honest, Soval doesn't really know. Since desperate because of the unwanted marriage, he always drank all the alcohol that woman pushed on him and, let's say, didn't spend his days very aware of what was going on. Anyway, Roval reminds him that Agile herself claims the daughter isn't his. Apparently, that crazy woman believes that by marrying Roval, Emile will automatically become his daughter. But that's not how things work. and he's going to make the reason for the divorce very clear to the Office of Justice. As for his brother, he should stay quiet and let his wife destroy herself with her own lies while Roval takes care of everything. Speaking of that, he apologizes for his absence and thanks his brother for all the effort he's made to take care of the family while he was gone. Soval asks where he's been for the past 10 years, and Roval says he was in the spirit world, where he married the woman he loves, the Queen of Spirits, Origin. Besides that, he has a daughter with her, but he wants to keep that secret for now. Since that subject came up, Soval confesses that he also has a daughter, but not with Agiel, with the woman he truly loves, who isn't part of the nobility. That brings him great shame, and he lowers his head in embarrassment. But his brother calmly says he can bring that person home once Agiel is gone, even though she isn't noble. He respects his brother's decision, and even if everyone is against it, together they'll do whatever it takes to make it work. Admiring his brother's leadership, Soval points out that he himself isn't fit to lead the family, so he asks Roval to return for good. Roval argues that he's now a half-spirit and therefore couldn't succeed the family, since those who should lead in the human world are humans themselves. Even so, Soval would love for him to at least stay by his side on this journey, helping from the outside, since people live in harmony with spirits. Not just asking, Soval literally begs his brother to consider it. Roran comments that Soval has been fully dedicated to the Vancraft family alone since their father died, and Soval adds that the people were very happy about his brother's return, trying to convince him to stay. Seeing Roval's hesitation, Ellen and Origin decide to appear in the meeting to encourage him to make the right decision. First of all, the girl uses her usual emotional blackmail, saying she hates her father because he despises his own brother. After regaining his sanity from that shocking statement, Roval introduces his wife to everyone, and also his beloved daughter, who is as beautiful as her mother, as he proudly says. Ellen and Origin try to convince the man to stay there. After all, he needs to protect his family. Knowing he can't fight against those two, Roval gives in and decides to stay, promising to be his brother's assistant. Moved by the decision, Roran approaches Ellen and asks her to call him Grandpa. When the girl calls him that, the old man can't resist and almost has a heart attack from so much happiness and affection for such an adorable child, especially because it feels like he really has a lovely granddaughter now. Roval, as jealous as ever, tells the man to calm down, but Roran is determined not to give up adopting Ellen as his granddaughter. Meanwhile, in the dining room, Agiel waits furiously for Roval to appear. Meanwhile, still in the meeting, the man asks his brother to say he doesn't remember having made that child with his wife, because after all, that's the truth. When everything is decided for tomorrow, Roval asks his wife to watch over them on such an important day. So the Queen of Spirits rewards her husband in an unexpected way that embarrasses Ellen. The girl calls her father a hidden pervert. And as the two get into an argument, Alberto and Soval notice how happy and united that family seems to be. Meanwhile, in the throne room, the king learns of reports about Roval's possible arrival in the kingdom. Therefore, something must be done about Agiel, since her relationship with Soval is simply terrible, and Roval will not accept that at all in his own home. Thus, the king orders Ravissol to be called to shed some light on this mess. When he appears before the throne and learns what's going on, Ravissol concludes that Roval will not let this situation with Agiel pass. So he makes a point of reminding His Majesty that he once gave an important piece of advice, but the king preferred to listen to others and pushed Agiel toward the Vancrafts. Either way, they can't afford to anger Roval any further, since his power is irreplaceable for the country. Therefore, there's only one way out of this. The next day, Roval Vancraft presents himself before the ruler of the Labor Kingdom to inform him of his return. The king offers a reward to the man for his return, so Roval asks for limits on the interference the royal family has in his family, as well as the king's presence in person at the divorce between his daughter and her husband, Soval. Upon hearing this, Ravissol analyzes that the Vancrafts are truly distancing themselves from the court. Then, Roval reveals that the one asking for this divorce is not him, but Agiel herself, and that news leaves everyone present astonished. Ravissol ponders that, this way, it seems as though the court sees the Vancrafts as enemies. A noble from the court asks the reason for Agiel wanting the divorce, and Roval reveals that she wishes to marry another man, which makes the king nearly faint. Seeing the situation getting worse, Ravissol steps forward and declares that the court accepts the Vancrafts' request, but certain concessions must be made in exchange. From the water mirror, Ellen asks who that Haraguro is, and Origin says he's the next king who, by the way, has never liked Roval. Then she asks what Haraguro means, and her mother says it means that inside Ravissol's belly there's darkness. It represents a deceitful being with a bad personality. Roval asks what those concessions would be, and Ravissol reveals that the royal family needs the Vancraft family as the court's main power. Roval replies that he's not the one who should decide that, since he's not the leader of his family, so the two schedule a meeting to settle that matter. With that, Roval leaves, and Ellen notices through the water mirror that something strange and black is coming out of Ravissol. To explain that dark aura, Her mother tells her that long ago there was a king like Agiel, who depended on the spirit's powers and demanded that Origin appear even when it wasn't necessary. Because of that, the spirits became enraged and cast a curse on the royal family. Since then, they have held the Spirit Festival every year, wishing for the spirits' forgiveness for what they did. However, over time, they ended up forgetting why they had received that curse and kept wondering why the spirits didn't hear their voices and why their prayers were always so empty. Since that time, Roval had already been a very conscious child about the spirits' side in that conflict, to the point that he believed the spirits didn't want to help people without real intention. Because of his personality, Origin ended up falling in love with him, although she forced the boy to sign a contract with her. Ellen asks how old her father was when they got married, and Origin shamelessly answers that the boy was only 7. The next day, the long-awaited moment of the divorce hearing arrives. The judge asks if Soval and Agiel agree, and both confirm, so according to the documents provided by Roval, the judge asks if the woman really wants the divorce to marry another man, and she answers without hesitation that yes, she does, and that she will marry the man who came to get her in this case, Roval himself. The judge reminds her that this engagement had been cancelled a long time ago, but Agiel argues that Roval willingly returned to get her and their daughter, Emil. The judge asks the man if that's true, and he denies it, claiming that, as stated in the document, he was in the spirit world for 10 years. Therefore, it would be impossible for him to be Emil's father, since she's 8 years old. Even so, it's also a lie that the girl is Soval's daughter, since Agiel herself declared, in front of the Vancraft family's servants, that she isn't his daughter. The king closes his eyes in anger at that terrible statement, while Ravissel keeps a smile on his face. Before Roval's account, the judge determines that Agiel had feelings for another man while she was still married and that her daughter, Emil, is proof of her infidelity. Therefore, the woman's excessive expenses will be considered a breach of marital vows, and the divorce between Agiel and Soval will be granted. Furthermore, due to the crime of breaking a contract with the goddess, the condemned woman will never be allowed to marry again. Outraged by this decision, Agiel approaches the judge to protest, but she's struck by a magic circle that rises from the ground and releases dark roots that mark the woman's wrists. According to the judge, this is the goddess Vara's punishment, the mark that prevents Agiel from even getting close to other men. Desperate, she runs to embrace her beloved Roval, but an invisible wall makes her crash face first and fall to the ground. The punished woman begs her father for help, but he also judges her for her foolishness, and both he and Ravissel apologize for her behavior, which means they understand the punishment the king's daughter has suffered. With the sentence imposed and the punishment applied, the judge ends the session. Everyone leaves the courtroom, while Agiel stays behind, desperate. In the Spirit Kingdom, Ellen admits she thought it would be harder to settle that fight, and Origin finds it very strange that Ravissel watched everything in silence. Speaking of the devil, as he pours himself a glass of wine in a closed office, Ravissel notices Roval's reflection in the glass. Roval asks if the man is happy that things turned out as he imagined. He admits that he is, since his spoiled sister will be confined, and soon his father will renounce the throne. Being sincere, Ravissel regrets that Roval did not become his brother-in-law, but he understands that just hearing that makes the man sick, especially because, after 10 years in the spirit world, as people have said, he ended up building his own family, even having an adorable daughter. Roval loses his temper upon realizing that this wicked man has discovered about Origin and Ellen, while Ravissel suggests that their children should marry someday. Obviously, Vancraft refuses the proposal. He even reminds him that Ravissel himself promised that the royal family would stay away from his. About that, the heir to the throne promises to step back, but only for now. Furious, Roval returns home immediately and orders Roran to call Alberto at once. When he finally manages to meet with that subordinate, the Lord immediately makes it clear that he doesn't know whether this will be good or bad for the family, but he asks the employee not to do anything else that might irritate him. Then, he announces that he will take Alberto away from Soval and asks him to remain in seclusion for a while. In the next scene, Roval meets his mother after 10 years away from home, and the emotion in the woman's eyes is evident. The man hugs her to show that everything is fine and apologizes for having stayed away for so long. Knowing her son, the mother was sure he would not come back because that awful woman would manage to force him to marry her. Honestly, she didn't think that lunatic would side with Soval, but she's happy that Roval managed to drive the wretch out. Soval tells Roran to send all that woman's belongings to the palace, then asks where Alberto is. His brother reveals that he distanced the employee from Soval and left him in seclusion, since he seems to have a very loose mouth, meaning he's not someone trustworthy. Shocked, the man's mother asks for an explanation, and he reveals that he is already married and has a daughter with a spirit, which is something very few people can know. However, Prince Ravissel made it clear that he already knows about it. which means Alberto must have spilled the secret at some point. It's important to remember that the royal court was cursed by the spirits, so they have reasons to want to plot something. In any case, it seems that Ravissel wants to use Roval's daughter to bring the spirits and the court closer again. Roran asks if Alberto used Ellen as a bargaining chip, and Roval categorically confirms that he did. Outraged by the betrayal, the butler asks if they should eliminate the colleague, but Roval believes that would dishonor their father's feelings. Soval emphasizes that Alberto feels indebted to their father and may have tried to negotiate because of Agiel, but either way, Soval apologizes to his brothers, saying this only happened because of his incompetence. One way or another, Roval asks everyone to lift their heads and overcome it. Now that everyone knows about his family, he decides to live normally by their side. Speaking of which, Roval's mother asks if it wouldn't be polite for her son to introduce his wife before anything else. Watching the scene through the water mirror, Ellen asks if Origin isn't afraid of Roval's mother after all. She's her mother-in-law. Origin is happy that her daughter has already learned that word but seems not to understand the gravity of the situation. Ellen wants to know what her mother will do if that woman turns out to be terrible. But the Queen of Spirits takes it lightly, saying that, if that's the case, they can simply never see each other again. Ellen points out her mother's detachment from worldly matters, but she couldn't expect anything different from her. Roval's mother asks when she will meet Roval's wife and daughter, so he summons the two right then. Without delay, Ellen and Ori appear and enchant the human woman in a surprising way. Introducing herself with all her charm, Ori says that, in the land she came from, she is called the Queen of Origin and Mother of All, the great queen of her civilization. She also assures that one day, the grandmother's granddaughter will also reach that position. Roval asks Ellen to introduce herself to her grandmother, and the girl uses everything she has learned to soften the lady's heart with her politeness and charm. Excited by the situation, the lady asks to be called Grandma, which shocks the child, as she didn't expect that old woman to want to be so close right away. Still, after a few seconds of hesitation, Ellen manages to say the word Grandma, which makes Roval's mother as happy as someone who has won the lottery. Roran makes a point of approaching and pointing out how cute Miss Ellen is, until the girl calls him Grandpa, and then the two can't stop doting over the child. Soon after, the grandmother takes out some sweets and places them on the table for her granddaughter to eat. Eager to devour them, Ellen takes a moment to analyze the situation and considers that it might be another test. Instead of attacking the food, she delicately picks up her cup and shows all her table manners. Roran asks if etiquette is the same in the world of spirits and humans, and Origin answers that it is not, since spirits hardly eat. Speaking of that, she asks if it was her husband who taught their daughter to act like that, and he admits that he didn't. Either way, it was enough to win the grandmother's heart even more. Enchanted, she picks up a piece of candy to feed her granddaughter, but Roval stops her, afraid the girl might not eat dinner if she eats too much now. After that, the Lord invites Soval for a conversation and asks if he should help with business matters, though he makes it clear that he wants to avoid staying with the knights and that he also can't live in that house because of his wife and daughter. Ori explains that she cannot stay there because she is too powerful and might influence the human world. Human society could turn into a huge forest due to the abundance of the Queen of Spirits. Speaking of which, Ellen's grandmother asks what kind of spirit the girl is, and she says that she has the power of the elements. Faced with the woman's curiosity, the child explains that an element is a component that creates things. There are many combinations of elements, and practically everything is made through the union of these elements. Seeing that the adults are as impressed as they are confused, Ellen demonstrates in practice. She takes a piece of charcoal and changes its structure, transforming it into a diamond. Unable to believe their eyes, Soval asks if the little girl is also capable of generating minerals, and she then conjures a pile of gold bars on top of the table. While the man stood there frozen, the grandmother told her granddaughter not to flaunt that power everywhere she went. If word of it ever reached the outside world, it could cause serious trouble. The child promised to stick to more humble work, then conjured a small diamond and handed it to her grandma. Ori asked what his daughter planned to do with all that gold, since she had made far too much. The girl lowered her head, promising not to get so carried away next time. Roval said that, to make up for what Agiel had done, his brother should use the gold for the people, as if it belonged to the crown. Soval felt honored by that purpose. Ellen, however, warned that it could disrupt the economy, so it'd be wiser to mix the gold with some impurities. Roran asked if she was sure, and she nodded as long as they bought her a really nice cake. In that case, the butler promised to get one as big as the mansion. Seeing all this, Soval remarked that Ellen's power truly was incredible, and that it explained why Roval worried about letting the royal court find out. To throw them off, the grandmother suggested selling those materials somewhere else, if they ever had to sell them at all. Ellen proposed pretending that the gold came from a local mine, and, to make it look real, she'd personally ensure the miners actually pulled something from there. The grandmother was amazed by how grown up the little girl seemed, and Ellen quietly thought to herself that it was because she actually was grown up. Without revealing that, the girl offered to help with any business matters they might have, at which point Roval finally told his daughter to hit the brakes. After that family meeting, Soval gathered the staff to announce Agil's return to the royal court. He also took the chance to thank everyone who had endured that viper slithering through the mansion's halls for so long. Then, as the main point of the meeting, the Lord announced not only his brother Roval's return, but also the homecoming of Roval's beautiful family. To celebrate the occasion, a grand feast had been prepared so everyone could eat, drink, and enjoy themselves to their heart's content. When the banquet began, the atmosphere was cheerful and lively among all who ruled and served in the house, and the charm of Origin and Ellen quickly won over the entire staff. After Ellen accepted a cup of juice, Roran quietly wrote it down in his notebook. He wanted to remember her preferences so he could always bring her favorite treats without needing to ask. Soval noticed the butler's face soften completely when the girl called him Grandpa, and he admitted he couldn't blame him. He had never met anyone so worth serving with such affection. The grandmother praised her granddaughter's cleverness for understanding how the servants felt. Meanwhile, at the royal palace, Alberto informed Prince Ravissel that Roval had realized he was involved in the scheme and had therefore distanced him from Soval. Hearing that, Ravissel ordered the man to perform one last favor for him. Hours later, after the banquet, Roval announced that he needed to return to the spirit realm. Seeing the shocked faces of the lady of the house and the butler, Ori asked if they were really fine with the mansion's backyard turning into a forest. With no real argument against it, at least Roran and the Lord's mother managed to convince Ellen's father to let her spend the night there. Roval told his daughter it would be good for her to enjoy the human world every now and then, to which the girl replied that if her father wanted to be all cuddly with her mother, she didn't mind staying behind, muttering that there was a limit to such cheekiness. The Lord promised to pick her up in the morning and left with his wife. Ellen said she was sleepy, so Roran went to prepare the bedroom she'd share with her grandmother. The old lady decided to take a bath before bed and told Ellen she could go ahead and sleep first. And so she did. Ellen fell asleep in seconds. But in the middle of the night, she was awakened by Alberto, who handed her a letter from Prince Ravissel. Instantly, she remembered her father's words. The royal court had been cursed by the spirits, and the prince wanted to use his daughter to break that curse. Ellen asked Alberto if he didn't like this household, and he stammered nervously that of course he did. Realizing her tone had sounded harsh, she softened. The girl explained that her father was furious Alberto's attempt to help had come off as a serious intrusion. She reminded him that she and her father were half human, half spirit, which made them extremely valuable to the court. Though to them, it was nothing but a source of headaches. The court had no awareness of its own mistakes, meaning the same cycle would never end. They had not only forgotten that they once angered the spirits, they didn't even remember why. Pure selfishness. Realizing this was some sort of personal invitation, the girl told Alberto to cut all ties with the prince immediately. If her father found out, the punishment would be severe. Besides, Alberto knew he was expendable to Ravissel, and if he were cast out by this family, Haraguro certainly wouldn't care. Still, Ellen said her father was probably watching from somewhere and promised to convince him not to hold it against Alberto. As for the prince's letter, she instructed him to reply that she refused, since otherwise her father would be furious. With that, the girl burned the letter without hesitation and wished the man good night. The next morning, after Ellen finished breakfast, she was suddenly scooped into a crushing hug from her grandmother, more like a jiu-jitsu move than an embrace. Roran gently reminded her that squashing the child wouldn't be very productive, then served Ellen a cup of tea. As always, both of them were completely smitten by her cuteness, until her father finally emerged from the spirit world to pick up his luggage. Ellen asks if her father was being affectionate with her mother, and he answers with a smile that yes, he was, but then corrects himself after realizing that might sound strange. Aside from that, he mentions that his daughter has something important to say. So she reveals that Uncle Alberto has cut ties with Prince Haraguro and therefore should be spared from confinement. Faced with her father's anger at this opinion, Ellen asks if he doesn't have anything to say as well. The Lord's mother wants to know what this story is about, and with his silence, Ellen explains that the Lord knew the prince would send someone to her, so he left the girl there on purpose. The man's mother demands an explanation, but as her son grows uneasy, the granddaughter says that now that the prince knows about her existence, they would never have left without Ellen. As a way to show Lord Roval's anger, Ellen burned Ravissel's letter without even reading it. To end the discussion, the little girl makes it very clear that she won't talk to her father until he properly talks with Uncle Alberto. After leaving the dining room, Roval admits once again that he can't win against his daughter. Roran comments that the girl is so mature she doesn't even seem like a child. Annoyed, Roval asks whose side the servant is on, and he answers that, obviously, he's on Ellen's side. The butler imagines the master knows what his daughter's intention was in burning the letter. And the Lord does know it was so that no one could connect Alberto with the prince, since now they have no proof. Roval wonders who his daughter takes after, saving others like that, and Roran assures him she's exactly like her father. The girl's father, however, thinks that's precisely the problem. Back at the royal castle, Ravissel learns from Alberto that Ellen burned the letter without reading it. After completing his final task, Alberto says goodbye to the prince and heads for the exit. Before that, Ravissel makes it clear that his desire to have that child has only grown stronger, because he firmly believes she is capable of revealing why the spirits and the royal court cannot form a contract. Then it's Alberto's turn to meet Roval again and take responsibility for his actions. Despite everything, when asked, the servant assures him that he has cut ties with Ravissel. According to the Lord, Alberto does not know the real situation between the royal family and the spirits, and maybe he thought this would not be a problem for the Van Craeft family. However, because of that, the court now has its eyes on Ellen. By the way, truth be told, Roval is only talking to Alberto because his daughter asked him to, since she said she would not speak to her father if he didn't do it. He asks why Ellen burned the letter without reading it, because now there's no way to prove whether it was written by the prince. Alberto replies that the little girl wanted to save him. So the Lord points out that the man was saved not only by his father, but also by his daughter, which makes Alberto ask for forgiveness. In the end, Roval announces that Alberto will go back to taking care of Soval, but the truth is that the Lord still cannot trust him. Therefore, for now, the servant will remain under watch and should thank Ellen for that. After that, Roval leaves, and left alone, Alberto remembers the moment when Barvel saved him at a critical point in a battle, by pushing the young man to the ground and ending up being seriously injured because of it. Meanwhile, as always, Roran and Roval's mother are doting on Ellen, giving her everything she wants and even more, until the girl's father appears to finally get her attention back after doing what she asked. At first, the little girl keeps a stern face at him, saying that he should tell everyone around them the truth, which would be a big problem for them, since the values of humans and spirits are different. Ellen thinks it's wrong to punish Uncle Alberto before her father fulfills his duty to speak to everyone. After hearing that, when Roval promises to take care of it, the daughter goes back to treating her father well. And seeing how the man practically begs the girl for this kind of thing, his mother starts wondering who the child in this relationship really is. Ellen quickly says that she understands that her father is doing this for her own good, but if he is going to use her as a reason, she would like to be warned first, because she ended up treating her father badly through all of this, which he agrees with, sadness in his heart. Changing the subject, the girl asks if the Lord will help her deal with Heraguro. The father asks what that is, and she explains that it's Ravissel, because of his bad personality. When the man comments that it's a very accurate description for that guy, the girl replies that it also describes her father, and that throws the poor man back into the mud, emotionally speaking. To make the atmosphere a bit lighter, Roran takes Ellen to play in the yard and calls a group of maids to join. After the girl counts to 10 with her eyes closed, it's time for her to find where everyone is hiding. But it's clear that the clever girl is not very good at this game, since she can't find anyone at all. Seeing that his dear granddaughter is about to cry because of this, Roran simply decides to leave his hiding place and offers to help her in this little adventure. And on top of that, he betrays the maid he was hiding with by revealing her position. Then the butler kicks a tree and makes 3 more maids fall, until Roval appears to help too. From that point on, the game becomes a piece of cake, since the Lord easily finds the women hidden in the most unusual places. When he finds everyone and asks what his daughter thought, she replies with a grumpy face that she was playing with Grandpa and the maids, and he wasn't supposed to join the game. To make up for the time lost because of her father's interference, Ellen asks for another round of hide and seek, and the maids gladly agree after all. They don't really have a choice. While she counts to 10 again with her eyes closed, Ellen hears her father asking to join the game. But the Lord is pathetically ignored by his daughter. Watching that, Roran admits that he never expected to see his master like this, while Roval's mother says that, either way, Ellen brings great joy to everyone. At the end of the afternoon, still in the garden, Ellen asks her grandmother and grandfather if she can come play more often. And of course both allow it with smiles on their faces. Not only them, but Soval as well, who assures her that his niece can come whenever she wants. Finally, the girl asks Uncle Alberto to always talk to Uncle Soval if anything happens, wanting to protect her friend after everything that happened to him. On his knees, Alberto cannot express his gratitude for the kindness the little girl showed him despite everything. Then, after giving her grandparents a kiss on the cheek, Ellen kisses Alberto as well. Soval asks why he didn't get one, so his brother explains that the girl is not a big fan of mustaches. Even so, making a funny face, Ellen makes an effort and gives her uncle a kiss too. After that, the Van Craeft brothers gather in a room to discuss what to do with all the gold Ellen produced. Sovel thinks the idea of a mine is a good one, and Roran believes it's important to check the place first. In the end, this gold came as a blessing, because thanks to it, the family will not risk going bankrupt in this generation. Truth be told, Sovel makes a point of saying that his luck changed since his brother came back home, and Roran admits that things were a bit off track before that. Roval asks who the woman is that won his brother's heart, and he says it's the poster girl of a restaurant in town called Arya, while his daughter's name is Raphilia, who is the same age as Ellen. Sovel used to go to that restaurant with the people from the Order of Knights, and Arya had always been very kind to him. Roval and Roran insist that the Lord bring both of them home soon, and Sovel doesn't understand why. Roran explained that Ellen was the only heir of the Van Craeft family, but she would eventually inherit the title of origin, becoming the Queen of Spirits. For that reason, as Roval concluded, it was important to show the court that the Van Craefts had a proper successor. Once Ravissel ascended the throne, he would surely order his son to be pushed toward Ellen. On that subject, Sovel pointed out that he could only remarry after 3 years, since he had gone through a divorce, but fortunately, the court made an exception because of the case Arya had created. Even so, he still had doubts about whether he should take that next step with Arya. His brother, however, insisted that the woman and her daughter be brought to the mansion the very next day. Meanwhile, at the castle, Ravissel watched his son training in the courtyard, unable to shake from his mind the image of the child born between Roval and the Queen of Spirits. The next day, Sovel warmly welcomed Arya and Raphilia, introducing them to his brother. For some reason, Roval avoided looking directly at either of them, and still managed to ask the woman to take good care of his brother. Tears filled Arya's eyes as she was called to meet the other members of the family and shown around the mansion, the rooms, the daily routine, the household chores. From now on, she would also belong to the Van Craeft family. At one point, while glancing through a window on the second floor, she caught sight of Roval and wore that same strange, emotional little expression on her face. As the days went by, the same thing kept happening. Roval avoided looking at Arya, while Arya couldn't take her eyes off him. Back in the spirit realm, Ellen was happy to see that her father was properly helping Uncle Sovel, but Origin didn't share that sentiment. She wasn't pleased at all, especially seeing her husband sitting beside 2 young ladies, sipping wine. Speak of the devil, Roval soon returned to the spirit realm, looking somewhat downcast, while Ori made sure to greet him with a cold stare. Ellen wasted no time explaining that her mother was upset after seeing him being flattered by those women at the party. Roval panicked, rushing to say he hadn't enjoyed it at all. That, in fact, he'd been trying to get away from the situation. Since Ori had seen everything through the water mirror, she admitted her husband hadn't paid any attention to the flirty ladies, though she still grumbled that he'd been going out too often lately to drink. Feeling guilty, Roval apologized and promised to spend more time by her side. Changing the subject, he mentioned that Sovel's wedding day had been set and that the royal family would probably attend. So he asked his daughter to stay behind in the spirit realm while the event took place. Ellen agreed with a smile. She'd hate to run into Haraguro anyway. Origin asked if it would be all right for her to show up, and her husband explained that it was important for everyone to see that he was, indeed, married, though he personally disliked the idea of exposing his beautiful wife to other men. Ori found that to be the most romantic thing she had ever heard. While Ellie yawned and headed off to bed, a day later, Roval frowned bitterly when he confirmed that the royal family really would be attending his brother's wedding. Sovel, surprised that they'd dare show their faces after the whole mess with Adjil, was skeptical, but Roval saw it as the perfect chance to rub in how happy the Van Craefts were now. Speaking of the wedding, Sovel imagined that their mother and Roran would be sad not to see Ellen there, but he understood it was best for the child. His brother was glad to hear him think that way. Just then, Arya entered the room with the tea they'd ordered. Sovel asked where Roran was, since he'd been the one asked to bring it. The woman confessed she'd insisted on serving it herself. Once again, she couldn't stop glancing at her brother-in-law, her cheeks growing visibly red. After she poured the tea, Sovel asked her to go prepare for the next day, but Arya, still staring at Roval, seemed as if she'd love to stay just a little longer. Watching all of this from the spirit realm, Origin asked Ellen whether she preferred to see her mother burn the world to ashes or flood it entirely. Ellen quickly begged her to calm down. After all, that was just the woman marrying Uncle Sovel. Besides, according to the little girl, her mother was far prettier than that Arya woman anyway. With teary eyes, Ori asked if she really meant that, and the child nodded with absolute conviction. Still, Origin didn't like seeing that woman gazing so shamelessly at her husband, but Ellen reassured her that her father had already noticed and was carefully avoiding any interaction. Finally, the big day arrived, Soval and Aria's wedding at the church. As the royal family began to arrive, Ellen admired how beautiful her parents looked from within the spirit realm. Before leaving, they kissed their daughter and reminded her not to appear in the human world under any circumstances. Moments later, the couple appeared in the room where the bride and groom were waiting. Aria, delighted to see her brother-in-law, froze the moment she noticed his wife standing beside him. Ellen could see how devastated the woman looked after meeting her mother, and she hoped that would finally make her stop staring at her father. Soval then introduced Raphilia to Ori, who hoped the girl would become a friend to Ellen. When everyone descended to the main hall, Roval showed his wife the royal family. In the central thrones sat the current king, Ravissel, and his wife, Layler. Beside them were the first prince, Gaediel, the second prince, Raisel, and Princess Seal. Origin remarked that the first prince seemed intelligent, while Ellen, watching through the water mirror, could sense that all of them, every single one, emanated that same dark energy, not just Haraguro. And finally, the bride and groom approached the priest to begin the ceremony. As Aria passed by Roval, even in her shyness, she couldn't help but steal a quick glance at him. Then, the priest asked whether they vowed to love each other in good times and bad. Once they both answered yes, he requested that they sign the wedding book. The first to approach the book is Aria, but just as she's about to sign her name, she gets an electric shock in her hand. Ellen is certain that the woman has suffered Vara's sentence, and now that Haraguro has noticed, some kind of trouble is bound to happen. In fact, if more people have realized it, the wedding might even be annulled. So Haraguro will take advantage of the situation to spread rumors that the Vancraft family has been abandoned by the goddess. Thinking of a way to divert attention from the sentence, Ellen appears in the church and conjures a dazzling rain of diamonds so beautiful and radiant that it gives the guests the impression that the wedding is being blessed by the goddess. Ellen imagines her plan is working, although it seems her parents have already realized she's the one behind it. Even Ravissel gives in and tells his son Gaediel that the Vancrafts are blessed by the spirits. Meanwhile, the first prince ends up seeing Ellen, and when the girl looks back at him, a unique moment begins, whether born of tension or, perhaps, love at first sight. As those crystals fell from the sky, Gaediel thought about how nice it would be if he could also see spirits. When he caught one of the crystals in his hand, ironically, in front of him stood a human who was also a spirit. Ravissel drew his son's attention to say that the royal family cannot form contracts with spirits, which has been the greatest mystery of the royalty for a long time. Since they are unable to receive the grace of the spirits, they end up depending on the Vancraft family for that. Meanwhile, Ori reassured her husband, saying that Ellen had returned safely to the Castle of Spirits. Even though he was relieved, the Lord was already planning to give the girl a sermon when she got back. Later, when the couple met the king in one of the palace corridors, Roval asked his wife to give him some space to talk to his majesty. Right away, Ravissel commented that the Lord's daughter was not present, and Roval explained that Ellen was not feeling very well. The king made it clear that he did not believe that story, but said it was a pity Ellen had not attended, since he wanted to introduce her to his sons. Changing the subject, His Majesty made a point of mentioning the curious event with Soval's bride at the time of the vows. Roval avoided the topic, saying that his brother was lucky to marry such a beautiful woman. Ravissel gave a cynical laugh and said he would be waiting for Roval and his daughter at the royal castle, so that they could meet his children. At the Vancraft mansion, Aria looked at the mark on her wrist with a terrible feeling. Speaking of which, Roval and Origin entered the room where she was and told the maids to leave. Filled with anger, the man approached Aria and grabbed her wrist, demanding to know what it meant. Ori asked her husband not to be aggressive, so he let go of the woman and said that because of her, the royal family was now watching Ellen, since the goddess Var had cast a sentence upon Aria and the whole court had learned about it. Now they might try to corner the Vancrafts. Seeing that the man was getting more and more irritated, Ori stepped closer and said she understood that he was so angry because he loved his wife and daughter. But the truth was that they had just been very unlucky, while that deceitful Ravissel had been very fortunate. Either way, she said Ellen would be fine after all. She was their daughter and always had a trick up her sleeve, just as she had shown at the wedding. Turning to Aria, the Queen of Spirits asked if she really had the courage to offer her daughter as payment for a sin committed by a stranger. Aria replied that she would never give Raphilia as a sacrifice, so the spirit assumed the woman understood the situation. In exchange for keeping quiet about the sentence, the court was asking for Ellen. After that, Ori asked if Aria had made a false vow in the goddess's book, thinking of another man instead of her fiancé at the time of signing. Roval emphasized that the thorn-shaped mark on Aria's wrist was the sentence of Vara, the proof that the bride had lied to the goddess. Therefore, it was clear that this woman was deceiving his brother. Origin tried to calm the situation by saying that the mark was still weak, meaning that Aria might truly love Soval, but she needed to show it with all her heart, without looking to the sides. Otherwise, she would follow the path of ruin. Finally, the spirit cast a spell that hid the mark from everyone except Aria, who would still be able to see it. Then, when she truly started to love Soval, it would disappear. Still angry, Roval demanded that the woman tell no one about it, not even his brother. Watching the scene through the water mirror, Ellen regretted that her uncle had not found happiness even after Agiel's passing. It was also the first time she saw her father with that angry expression after all. Haraguro had declared war, and since that was what he wanted, the girl decided to gather information that could be important for a possible conflict. In the royal carriage, leaving the wedding event, Gadiel could not get Ellen out of his mind. With the crystal in his hand, he asked his father why the royal family could not form contracts with spirits, and Ravissel explained that it was not just a matter of contracts. In fact, they could not even approach the spirits, and the reason for that had been a mystery for a long time. Back at the Van Craeft residence, Arya was inconsolable, not knowing what to do or where to go. Although Roval had told her to stay quiet about the mark until she could prove to Soval that she loved him, the woman did not think it was right to hide it. Soval entered the room and asked if his wife was all right, since she looked pale and worn out. Refusing to keep it a secret, she decided to tell her husband everything. At the Castle of Spirits, Ellen went to the library and gathered dozens of books until Vint arrived to warn her not to make a mess and risk upsetting her parents. The girl replied that her parents would not scold her for studying their enemies, so the spirit told her to ask him anything she wanted to know, as that way she could study much faster. Since that was the case, the girl asked about the curse the spirits had cast on the royal family, because she had seen with her own eyes the dark aura coming from the members of the court, and her mother had said it had to do with a curse. Vint was impressed that such a young girl could see the aura, but even so, he regretted that he could not reveal much to her yet, as she was not old enough for that. By the way, he asked what she meant by studying the enemy, and she explained that Haraguro, or rather, King Ravissel, had taken advantage of one of the Van Craeft's weaknesses and invited her and her father to the royal palace. Hearing that, Vint was filled with hatred and unleashed an impressive power that radiated around his body like a gust of wind. According to him, those damned people never learn. Seeing that he had gone too far, the spirit stopped the wind and apologized for the excess, showing that she was truly willing to do something to change things. Ellen insisted on learning about the curse, so the man gave in and decided to tell her what had happened. The event took place 200 years ago, during the monster storm, when the strategy the king had devised at that time to contain such a calamity became the reason for the curse that the court now bears. The royal family, trying to reduce their disadvantage in battle, reached out to the otherworld, demanding that the Queen of Spirits be sent to fight. Obviously, such an order could not simply be obeyed, since it made no sense to help humans for so little. Because of this, completely frustrated, the king ended up staining his hands with a taboo. After hearing everything, Ellen lay in her bed that night, deep in thought, when her parents knocked and entered her room. The girl made a point of revealing that she now knew everything about the curse, already imagining that, sooner or later, their daughter would discover the truth behind it. Origin commented that Ellen was so kind she might try to undo the curse if she found out, but it was important for her to understand that the spirits would never forgive the royal family, whether for the tragedy or for the coldness of their spiritual kin. To that, Ellen replied that she wasn't kind at all. In fact, she found it irritating that the royal family could live such peaceful lives without even knowing the real reason behind the curse. Now, truth be told, Ellen also had human blood and knew very well what it meant to have feelings for the people she loved so much, like her grandmother, Uncle Albert, and Grandpa Roran. That was also why they needed to win this conflict, to keep those people safe. Besides, Ellen found it absurd that the royal court wanted to use the power of the spirits without understanding the weight of their sin. Roval tried to hug his daughter out of sheer pride, but the girl kept him away as best as she could. Her mother asked if she had been watching everything through the water mirror, and the child said she was well aware of Haraguro's declaration of war and announced that the Van Craeft family would accept it. Origin laughed and said that this was indeed Roval's daughter, and when Ellen didn't like the comparison, Roval became even more heartbroken. Ellen asked what had happened to Arya, and her mother told her that Arya had confessed her sin to Soval, even though Roval had told her to stay quiet about it. Because of that, Soval stopped the wedding celebration, and the household had turned into a real storm of anger. Speaking of which, Roval had told everyone that he was very upset and would be away from the mansion for some time. Even though her mother and Roran missed Ellen terribly, feeling sorry for her uncle Soval, the girl asked to visit her family right away, even though her father had just made it clear he wouldn't be returning. Using her stubborn charm, the girl knew she could get what she wanted from that man, so she used and abused that talent to be taken at that very moment to the Van Craeft residence. When she arrived, Ellen immediately ran to hug her grandmother, but it was she who ended up being hugged, since the lady insisted on squeezing the girl as if she were a stuffed toy, only stopping when Roran warned her that the child might run out of breath. Ellen said how much she had missed them, which melted their hearts as always. On the other hand, as Isabella pointed out, Everyone had thought the house would finally be filled with happiness. But unfortunately, things hadn't gone as planned. Even so, she said she was very happy to see her granddaughter once again. In the midst of all this, after being called, Soval entered the room with Arya. Ellen took a few steps forward and politely introduced herself to her uncle's fiancée. Soval asked what his brother wanted to talk about with Arya, but Roval explained that, in fact, the one who had something to say was Ellen herself. Arya was confused to see an 8-year-old child seemingly about to lecture her. So Soval explained that, despite her young age, Ellen was much more mature than she looked, and therefore, his fiancée should give her full attention. Thus, Ellen explained that her mother, thinking of what was best for Uncle Soval, had used a spell so that only Arya could see her own mark. Even so, Arya ignored the warning not to tell anyone and revealed the situation to her fiancé. Arya defended herself by arguing that, since Origin had said she should love Soval above all else, a good start would be not hiding something so important. On the other hand, Ellen couldn't understand how the woman thought she could be forgiven just by telling the truth, since Arya had been thinking of another man when she signed her marriage vows with Soval, which was a huge insult to the Vancraft family. Isabella agreed, as Soval himself had told them about the situation with Agiel, and Arya had still managed to do something very similar. Arya grew nervous and argued that, as a new member of the family, it was natural for her to want to be liked by her brother-in-law. Ellen used that argument to point out that the woman was admitting her feelings were impure, and that was why the goddess Vara had passed that judgment upon her. The girl revealed that the Vancraft family was loved by the spirits and therefore very important to the royal court. Arya already knew that, since her brother-in-law was seen as a hero. But Ellen stated that it wasn't just because of her father's title that the royal family needed the Vancrafts, but also because of his power, since Roval had strength enough to battle neighboring nations. However, Arya's selfish actions had become a reason to take that away from the kingdom. Afraid of harming his relationship with his brother, Roval made it clear he wouldn't return to the family mansion anytime soon. And that could be very harmful if he really stayed away from the human world. On the other hand, if the great burden behind all this chaos were to disappear, perhaps things could go back to normal. In this case, Ellen said without hesitation that the burden she was referring to was Arya. By the way, Ellen says that the court only came to see the wedding to judge the value of Soval Vancraft's bride, something very important that Arya threw away. Arya starts crying upon hearing those words, so Isabella assumes that the young woman must have suddenly fallen in love with Roval, especially since many women fall under that man's charm. But it's a pity, because Soval was so happy that he would finally marry the woman. And now he has to go through this. Crying, Arya swears that she loves Soval, so Ellen tells her to stop loving her father so much that she would risk her own life. Since the subject came up, Ellen promises that she and her mother will not let it slide if Arya tries to steal Roval from them. On the contrary, they will crush this woman little by little, and without hesitation, so she'd better be ready. Faced with that threat, Arya can't take the pressure and faints, and she only doesn't hit her head on the floor because Soval was there to stop it from happening. As he admits himself, he still wants to believe in his fiancée. When Arya is taken away, Soval says that if it weren't for Ellen, this family would be much more divided, and for that he is deeply grateful. Happy to hear that, Ellen reminds him that they need to go to the castle, something Roval didn't even want to remember for a second. Since that's the case, Isabella gets excited to arrange a new dress for Ellen and clothes for Roval, so she asks Roran to call the best tailor available. Soval apologizes for his mother's crazy excitement, because she had always wanted to have a daughter and now is enjoying having a granddaughter. In that case, Ellen joins the excitement and demands the presence of the women responsible for makeup. Once that's done, she tells her father to grab Uncle Soval so he can go through an important transformation. A few minutes later, after the maids shave his beard, Ellen is amazed by her uncle's beauty. In fact, now that he looks so handsome, the girl hopes that Arya will only have eyes for this man from now on. Meanwhile, in the royal castle, young Gadiel still couldn't get Ellen out of his head. Imagining that the young lady might be a spirit, the prince was approached by the king in one of the palace corridors. Ravissel said that Roval Vancraft would come to the castle with his daughter soon, and that the two would be introduced to Gadiel. Speaking of this meeting, Ellen delighted her grandmother with an outfit so beautiful, it would make anyone jealous, which she would wear for the occasion. Roran arrived to inform them that the carriage was ready. However, Roval had forgotten to mention that this time they would be traveling using teleportation magic. Ellen asked if her father was doing that so he wouldn't have to worry about the coachman in case of an escape. And the Lord praised his daughter's intelligence. Isabella and Soval wished Roval good luck so that he wouldn't lose to Haraguro, but he assured them it would be a peaceful visit. Likewise, Ori watched the scene through the water mirror and hoped her husband would take good care of their daughter. After teleporting, the guests arrived at the gates of the royal castle. But before entering, Roval began having an anxiety attack because he wanted to leave. Because of that, with a cheerful expression, his own child explained that there was no point in crying now. The man asked the reason for her excitement, and she admitted that she really wanted to talk to Haraguro in person. Hearing that, now more than ever, Roval could only feel fear about what might happen. One way or another, he had no choice but to face this mess head-on. So father and daughter walked toward the gate to gain access to the castle. Without delay, guided by the guards, the two arrived before Ravissel. The first thing Ellen noticed was the dark aura surrounding that disgusting man's body. However, ignoring that fact to maintain politeness, the girl politely introduced herself to His Majesty. The king admitted that he had really wanted to meet the girl, and she made a face that said, "Really?" Laughing, the king commented that she was just like her father. And to Roval's dismay, Ellen didn't like that comparison at all, so much so that the child's father tried to win her affection through a forced hug. When the guests were invited to sit down, because of this spontaneous display of affection from the Lord, Ravissel commented on how cheerful Roval seemed to be, and he explained that he had always been forced to hold himself back since childhood. Ravissel then apologized for the engagement with Agiel, but emphasized that it had been his father's decision. And besides, it's worth noting that neither of them were in the palace anymore. Agiel, who had caused trouble, and her father, who had to be held accountable for it, had gone to live in the mansion on the border and would never return. Seeing that the man said this while laughing, Ellen reflected that he had used his sister's mistake to remove their father from the throne. Therefore, there was no doubt that he was a Haraguro. Finally, Ravissel lamented that Soval was also an unlucky person, since his second wife coincidentally looked like Agiel. Roval asked what that story was about, and the ruler revealed that the rumors had already spread throughout the entire kingdom. Ellen asked where they came from, but the king said that was a story for children. However, the girl asserted herself and said that was a lie, since His Majesty had brought up the subject knowing she was capable of understanding. With the persuasive power of that girl, Ravissel now understood how she had managed to convince Alberto. Going further, Ellen pointed out that His Majesty was very indecent, since Uncle Alberto had only been worried about the Van Craeft family, and Ravissel had used that weakness to take advantage of him. She even admitted that she had thought of using Alberto as a double agent, but gave up on the idea because it was clear the man wasn't suited for it. With an awkward smile, Ravissel emphasized how incredible that girl was, then assumed that she already knew where the rumor about Soval's second wife had come from. Ellen knew she was being tested and that the king was using this problem to negotiate with her father. But given that the rumor had already spread, she couldn't imagine that Haraguro had been the one who started it. In the child's opinion, it might have been the queen. The king narrowed his eyes with curiosity as Ellen said that surely a woman would have noticed the way Ariel looked at Roval. Besides, the post-ceremony banquet had been cancelled, and the queen must have imagined something had happened, since one must have a certain level of influence to spread rumors about the Van Craeft family and bear the consequences. The one responsible had to be someone of nobility or higher, and that made Ellen suspect that the queen was the one guilty of the gossip. With a wicked smile on his face, Ravissel thought the deduction was magnificent, and added that she hadn't missed a thing, not even about Vara's sentence after all. Soval's wife had thorn marks just like Agiel, and hiding that could cause serious trouble for the Van Craefts. Ellen said she hadn't seen any thorn marks and was disappointed that the royal family had spread unfounded rumors about her family. Roval fully agreed and pulled his daughter away to leave. But when he was about to grab the door handle, Ravissel made it clear that this conversation wasn't over yet. To the guests' surprise, he admitted that he might have spoken based only on rumors and apologized for it, then promised to tell his wife that it had all been a misunderstanding. With that, he hoped everything would be fine between the Van Craefts and the royal family. Ellen, on the other hand, hinted that the king's true intention might be another. After all, even before the rumor spread, Ravissel had already requested her and her father's presence. Suddenly, aware of the girl's ability to read the situation, Ravissel directly asked if she wanted to be his daughter. Roval lost control as he remembered that the king had promised not to mess with his family, but the ruler pretended to be innocent. Even so, Ellen herself refused the offer, and when Roval melted with pride at his daughter's attitude, Ravissel could hardly believe that the hero was such a fool. He then expressed his wish to introduce his children to Ellen, and although Roval rejected the idea, His Majesty didn't need permission. Therefore, he ordered his children to enter the room, certain that Ellen would like them, since they were popular with the girls from other families. Before that, the girl points out that this popularity comes from how much people desire their money and power, and Ravissel acknowledges that the parents of those girls are certainly like that, but that the girls themselves truly admire his sons. Other than that, he assures that the boys are quite handsome. When it comes to beauty, Ellen says she has her parents as good examples, so, refusing to meet the princes, she decides to leave. Dissatisfied, Ravissel asks Roval what on earth his daughter is, and the nobleman replies that his majesty would never be able to defeat Ellen after all, even he, as her father, cannot. Ravissel says he understands, but regardless, his two sons enter the room after knocking on the door. Without delay, the king introduces his eldest, Gadiel, 12 years old, and the youngest, Rachel, 9. As soon as Gadiel lays eyes on Ellen, he seems to realize she is that girl, while Rachel seems more interested in the hero Roval. For her part, Ellen could only see the black miasma that ran through the bodies of those people, and its intensity frightened her. Gadiel approaches to check how the girl is doing, but that only makes things worse, causing her to shout for no one to come near. The prince, not understanding what it's about, insists a little more, and when the miasma begins to form evil shapes in his shadow, Roval takes action and also tells the boy to back away. Suddenly, the spirits come out from around the prince and start flying across the room, the reason why Roval hadn't wanted to bring his daughter there. One of the spirits, coming out of Ravissel's body, begs for help and screams in pain, and that scene terrifies Ellen so much that she starts screaming in fear. With that scream, an unexpected reaction occurs among the spirits, and even Ravissel and his sons begin to feel intense pain in their heads. From that moment on, the king is able to see a vision being formed by the spirits. In that vision, before a huge gate, a man speaks to the Queen of Spirits and says that for them to overcome that monster tempest, they need her strength. However, since he receives no answer, the man decides to use a spiritual magic user as bait to lure the spirits to that place, even though he had promised that the deal would be something else. In short, that human ruler wanted to use the spirits as sacrifices to defeat the monster tempest, since he could not obtain the Queen of Spirits' help. What followed was a series of terrible scenes, where the spiritual beings were tortured and massacred. In the middle of it all, Rachel cannot resist and faints, while the king of that time, inside the vision, surrounded by a great number of sacrifices, demands that the gate be opened. The pain intensifies and Gadiel also falls to the ground, while one of the tortured spirits continues to beg for Ellen's help. Roval uses a power to drive away the ghosts, which keeps circling the room and seriously affecting the royal family. Ravissel asks what on earth is happening, and Roval explains that this is the curse the court received. Finally, Lord Vancraft teleports away with his daughter, while the king joins the boys on the floor because of the unbearable pain. Quickly, Roval lays Ellen on a bed so she can rest in the spirit realm, since she is visibly shaken and struggling to breathe properly. Ori arrives soon after to calm the girl down with her gentle demeanor and manages to make the child close her eyes and try to sleep. The father asks if his daughter will really be alright, and Ori notes that she has a fever, but nothing too concerning. Aside from that, Ori understands it was too soon for Ellen to have contact with those things. Roval points out that they should not have met, and besides, it seemed that the members of the royal family were also able to see the curse. The Queen of Spirits believes Ellen must be the cause, because the souls of the spirits certainly noticed that she is her daughter and went to ask for help. Sometime later, back at the work castle, Ravissel wakes up worried about his sons and is informed that both are still unconscious, but they are fine. Days later, while the long-awaited spirit festival takes place in the middle of the city, where the population gathers for a great celebration, the royal family prays before a spiritual rock, and when everyone leaves, Gadiel stays a little longer. His younger brother calls for him to go, and on the way, questions whether these prayers really reach the spirits, since every year they pray during the festival. Yet the curse has lasted for 200 years. Rachel thinks the court should have already been forgiven, especially since he and his brother have nothing to do with it. Gadiel thinks about it and wonders why the spirits avoid the royal family. According to him, the answer was in an ancient book he discovered in a secret room, everything that humans cause to the spirits, and the uncontrollable wrath that came from it. What Gadiel saw in that room, at that moment, he now knows was what happened 200 years ago, and the rock where they pray today was the place where it all occurred. Deep down, human remorse has long disappeared, which takes away the meaning of the prayers. The only thing left is the past with the spirits and the wounds they cause, the cry that cannot be heard. Now, in yet another spirit festival, before the stone, the prince wonders how Ellen has been since that day. To be honest, he wishes he could see that girl again, even for an instant, just to apologize. Speaking of which, maybe one day the spirits will forgive the royal family of Tenbol. That is the young prince's wish, as he bids farewell to the rock and promises to return another day. Behind the stone, Ellen was crying uncontrollably. Later, in the spirit realm, Ori tells her daughter that the higher spirits wanted the humans to understand the mistake they had made. So, for the king to hear the spirits' cries, they cast a spell that made the ruler hear that despair until the moment of his death. Because that spell was cast only on the king of that time, his descendants shouldn't have inherited the curse. In fact, what happened was that the souls of the spirits who lost their place cursed the royal bloodline and attached themselves to it, and that is the black aura Ellen sees around the members of the royal family. That's why, even today, the court remains in this situation. Speaking of which, Ori knows that her daughter went to the spirit festival, something she had already expected would happen, because knowing her daughter, she certainly would feel empathy and try to undo the curse. That's why the mother never gave many details. About that, the child confesses that she wants to save those like her who are trapped in it, to free them from the pain, the suffering, and the unreal rage they felt on that day. Ori replies that she already knew her so kind daughter would say that, but it's very unlikely that she will be able to change this situation. Ori remembers that humans have been offering prayers all these years only out of tradition, and that they no longer feel gratitude toward the spirits, much less reflect on their mistakes. And that's why they haven't been forgiven yet. The queen knows it sounds suspicious to say that, considering she married Roval, but she says it's better not to side with the cursed humans or with the souls of the lost spirits. That's the warning Ori gives as a goddess and as a mother. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.